James Hetfield, Papa Het, the man that has defined guitar playing for me. He has one of the best rhythm hands, and he has changed the game for every metal guitarist that's come after him. From a strict, doctor-free childhood home, to swapping cheap guitars for custom Explorers. His journey is packed with twists, stolen gear, and tonal breakthroughs that you'd never guess shaped some of metal's most iconic riffs. And it's not just the gear. It's how these riffs feel under your fingers that still sets the standard. In this video, we're going to deep dive into Hetfield's gear, his tone, and why his playing style has been a secret weapon for every rhythm guitarist that has followed. Plus, I'll share how his riffs changed the way I've played, and maybe just change the way that you play as well. Let's get into it. James Allen Hetfield was born on August 3rd, 1963 in Downey, California. He had two half-brothers and a sister named Deanna. His father, Virgil Hetfield, was his mother's second husband, and he grew up in a Christian Science household, which meant no doctors growing up. They had to rely on spiritual healing for any of their ailments, and that included his mother's cancer, which she would lose the battle with when he was, I believe, 13.
Stupid, stupid, stupid!
It was even so strict that he wasn't even allowed in health class, which meant that he had to stand outside the door, and it felt like a punishment for him. This really alienated him early in his life, but now looking back on it, he says that it kind of shaped who he was. He started playing piano at 9, but he really hated all the structured classical lessons that he was being put through. But he has stated that all this rigorous practice got him used to using his right and left hand and singing at the same time. He also used to love messing around on his brother's drum kit and listening to his brother's music. At some point, guitar just took over. He doesn't exactly remember how he learned to play the guitar though. His first guitar was a cheap swap meet guitar he bought for around like $5, and he repainted it a bunch of times. That was until his mom bought him his second guitar. It was like a 1960s SG. He doesn't remember the exact year, but a kid in the jazz club in his high school had this guitar, and he was selling it for around, I think, $200, and he convinced his mom, and his mom bought it for him. Eventually, though, he sold off this guitar because he wanted to pursue just singing in a band, which is pretty funny now, considering how much he hated being the vocalist of Metallica for a while. As far as influences go for him, it's a pretty wide mix. Dio, Lemmy, Malcolm Young, Rudolph Schenker, Johnny Ramone, especially for his downpicking, and Tony Iommi, who he still calls the riff master. But it was Joe Perry from Aerosmith that really got him to want to pick up a guitar and start learning. Before Metallica, he was in 4 different bands. His first band was called Obsession. It was his high school band with a few of his buddies. They did a lot of covers, and he tried to bring in an original song, and they weren't too keen on playing it. And that's when he realized he wanted to take music a lot more serious than his peers. So he knew that he needed to find like-minded individuals to kind of step up his game. He also briefly joined a Rush cover band called Syrinx. Then he was in Phantom Lord, which played a mix of covers and original songs. And in that band, he was playing guitar and the lead vocalist. And then he would form Leather Charm with Ron McGovney, the first bassist for Metallica. And then, as we all know, he would link up with Lars Ulrich, start Metallica, and the rest is history. All those early experiences and influences would lead James to creating his own style and tone that would be the backbone for Metallica. So let's break down the gear that became those iconic sounds. Real quick, if you're enjoying this deep dive into James Hetfield and you want to see more content like this, please go check out my Patreon or my YouTube membership. On both, you get early access to videos, Q&As, behind-the-scenes content, and you'll get discounts on the guitar tones that I create. So if you're interested in supporting me at all, that would mean a lot to me. I have one tier that's $1 and one tier that's $4.99. So please go check those out. Then I want to give a huge shout out to ToneDeck. They've been supporting me since day one, and I have discount codes for you below to get some discounts on the best tone-matched album IRs in the game. So if you want to play along 2 Master Puppets with a guitar tone that sounds like it's ripped straight from the album, I would go check them out. I'll have links for everything down below. Let's get back to the video. His first rig for Metallica features the gear that I think is still probably his favorite to this day. The guitar he was using at the time was the Electro Flying Wedge, and he has called it the OGV. It's a cheap knockoff Gibson that he bought. He didn't realize that it was a knockoff. It had Gibson on the nameplate, and it looked like the guitar that Michael Schenker from UFO was using, so he thought it was a real deal. Obviously, as everyone knows now, it wasn't, but to him, it was. And it was real for Lars as well. They saw this guitar, they knew that their favorite guitarist played this guitar, and they felt this was a huge step up for the band. It's the guitar that wrote all of Kill 'Em All and all of Ride the Lightning. As for his amp at the time, he was using a Jose Arredondo modded Marshall 2203. And the mod to the amp hot rodded it so it would give a lot more gain, and that made it so he didn't need to use a distortion pedal. although he did end up using a Proco Rat on Kill 'Em All. And he paired that amp with a Marshall 4x12. I think it had Celestion G1275s in it, but it also could have had G1265s in it. And this entire setup is what we're hearing on Kill 'Em All. The outro bridge to Seek and Destroy is one of the perfect examples of why I love Hetfield's writing. It's really simple, but it hits hard. It wraps up the song with a heavy, headbanging riff that a guitarist at any level could play. And it includes a lot of downpicking, which is a staple for Hetfield. By the time Metallica was in the studio to record their second album, Hetfield had lost a major part of his tone. As I think a lot of you guys know by now, while they were on tour in Boston, he had his gear stolen, and they took his modded Marshall. That meant once they got to the studio, he didn't have an amp, which led to Fleming hunting down every Marshall he could find in Denmark that would be suitable for the album. They eventually landed on a Marshall, but it's not exactly known which one it is. It's definitely got to be like a Marshall JMP or Marshall JCM 800, but I'm not exactly sure. I have found this picture online that may point to which one it is, but I don't know if I can verify the authenticity of the source, but it could be this one. But we do know, once again, he used his OGV to record all of the songs on the album. After the recording of the album on tour, we know that he did add an iconic piece to his setup, the Gibson EXP 83 in vintage white, which everyone knows as the So What guitar. He bought this guitar because he knew he needed a backup because all he was using at the time was the OGV. And this guitar was heavier in weight and in tone, and it stuck around for a really long time. The bridge in Fade to Black is one of my favorite examples of a riff that is sad and melancholic, but also really crushing and heavy at the same time. And James evokes a lot of emotions in his riffs, and I think this is one of my favorite ones that does this. It hits with a real emotional weight, but it's still really fun to play. Then came the recording for Master of Puppets in '85, and once again we would see another upgrade to his tone. Some sources, including James Hetfield himself, said that he used the Jackson King V on the recording of Master of Puppets. But I've also heard an interview from Fleming that said he mostly used the So What Gibson for most of the tracking. So again, I'm not 100% sure which guitar it was. I mean, James even admitted himself in the Messenger's book that he didn't like the sound of the Jackson King V, so they might have used mostly the Gibson and maybe just lower the Jackson, or maybe James is misremembering, or maybe Fleming's misremembering. But he definitely used either the So What Gibson or the Jackson King V. The real upgrade for this album came in the amp department. Right before the recording of this album, Kirk had convinced them to go check out the Mesa Boogie headquarters in Petaluma, California, I believe, and they got their first amp endorsement from them. But when they got to the studio, they weren't really impressed with the sound. So Fleming had to do a lot of tweaking to the amp to get it just to sound just right for them. And this included using two HX EQ F2s at the end of the tone. And again, they used Marshall 4x12 cabinets on this album. The last big shift in James's tone came right before the recording of And Justice for All. In '87, Lars and James attended the NAMM Expo. Initially, he wanted a Gibson endorsement, obviously because how much he loved the Gibson guitars, but they weren't interested. However, a Japanese company, ESP, really was, and they let him spec out an entire guitar, and it took him 6 months to make. And they created the ESP MX220, James's first signature guitar, complete with the middle finger inlays, matching headstock, and the right weight and feel for a James Hetfield guitar. Even though over the years he's had a ton of custom Explorers, I think this is the one that I would point to as like his specific guitar. Naomi had the SGs, Brian May had his custom guitar, and James has his white Explorers. Amp-wise, once again, they're using the Mesa Boogie Mark II C++, using Marshall cabs, and the Aphex EQ F2s at the end of the signal chain. One riff that doesn't get enough love is the main riff in The Shortest Straw. It's a rhythm player's riff through and through. It's not overly technical, but the constant downpicking and galloping make it really fun to play. And it's just classic Hetfield. It's tight, it's aggressive, and it just keeps the song moving forward. While those rigs are not the only ones James has used his entire career, he's had the Ken Lawrences, his custom Vs, the signature signal cuts that honestly rival the Explorers now, the Grinch Viper, all the double necks, and a bunch of custom acoustics. I think the ones that I highlighted are the most iconic, and really define his sound. And honestly, the same goes for the amps. He's used Diesels, Black Stars, and even a PV at one point. But when most people think of James Hetfield's sound, it's either a Marshall or a Mesa Boogie setup. The gear and the tone define James's sound. But what really hooked me is how the riffs felt to play, and how they shaped my own approach to guitar and music. It's honestly hard to quantify just how much James Hetfield has influenced me. I wouldn't exactly call him my hero. I think it just creates a weird one-sided relationship with someone you've never met before. But if I had to describe it, I think he'd be like an unofficial mentor. His riffs were the first riffs that felt right under my fingers. I'd been playing guitar for about a year before I heard Metallica. And up until that point, I had been trying to play classic rock riffs. And I don't know, I just didn't have the right swing or the right feel to play them correctly. Then I heard Metallica and everything just made sense. The downpicking, the galloping, and the tremolo picking. It all came naturally and taught me really important skills that every metal guitarist needs to know. That mix of melody and aggression is what I try to chase in writing my own songs. Even hearing him talk in interviews has just stuck with me over the years. What makes it even cooler for me is we're inspired by the same bands. Aerosmith was my favorite band, and Joe Perry really influenced me as well to pick up guitar. And Black Sabbath was the first metal band that I ever listened to. And I don't know if they were his first metal band, but I think we connect with their music in the same way. So yeah, I may not know him personally, but for all the unintended guidance that he's given me, I'm truly grateful. James Hetfield is arguably the most important rhythm guitarist in all of metal, with only Tony Iommi in that same conversation. I know some people are probably yelling at me, what about Dave Mustaine, or what about Dimebag Darrell, but I consider them more lead guitarists. It's honestly wild to hear guys like Isaac Hale from Knocked Loose and Cody from Wage War talk about how much Hetfield has also influenced them. These are massive bands today, and they're still pulling influence from something that started in 1981. And that honestly tells you everything you need to know. Hetfield's riffs, his downpicking, and his entire style. It's alive and it's showing up in modern music. That's the kind of mark that doesn't fade. It sticks, and it echoes through in every crushing riff you hear from bands today. His riffs are still teaching us, not just how to play, but how to write, how to lead without showing off, and how to say more with less. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please don't forget to subscribe. I'm trying to hit 3,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and everyone helps. Also, if you enjoyed this video, I want you to check out this one right here. I actually recently did a video on Black Sabbath and Tony Iommi and how much they influenced the metal scene and myself. So I think if you enjoy this one, you'll enjoy that one. Again, I want to thank you for watching. Stay metal. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.